is, I'm going to call us to order at 6:01. Okay, and Chris is going to help with the monitoring tonight, or monitoring the minutes tonight. Is there anyone interested in trying out the board monitor position and the evaluation?
Oh, like being the person who does it at
Yes,
the
who
end?
kind of pays attention to it during the meeting and then at the end, when we get to the evaluation, kind of lets us know what they saw. Up for it, Aaron?
I'll be the, yeah.
All right, Aaron. All right. Okay, our next item is public comment. We don't have anyone in the room, so if there's anyone online, I see Herb Olson's hand up. So Herb.
Yes, hi. Happy New Year, everyone. You do have a jam-packed agenda, Don. You have a bunch of monitoring reports, and I want to direct my comments to those monitoring reports. First, the monitoring report on 3.2, accountability of the superintendent. There's an interesting part of the policy, and it says the board will view the superintendent's performance as identical to organizational performance, so that organizational accomplishments of the board, as stated the ends and avoidance of the board prescribed means, are successful performance for the superintendent. That only works if your policies are specific and clear and measurable. And I think, I think the past couple of years and the tumult that we've had really underscores that your policies are not specific enough. And as a result, this policy statement really doesn't reflect. It needs to be. You either need to change this policy statement, or you need to pick up the pace in terms of clarifying what your actually policies are. The second monitoring report that I want to comment on is 4.3, agenda planning. And the policy says the board will follow an annual agenda that, amongst other things, completes a re-exploration of the ends policy annually. As far as I know, that is, at least over the past few years, that has never been done. And it really should be done. I note that the report says, well, yeah, it should be done. That's why there's partial compliance, but really doesn't offer a specific plan to bring the board into compliance, which would include, well, what are you going to do about that? How are you going to re-explore the policy, which is one of the core policies of the board? And it's just left, there's no time lines, there's no specifics. If you approve this monitoring report, you're going to be back at square one, without anything changed. The third monitoring report has to do with governing style. I think this was carried over from a previous discussion, 4.1. And the report notes that there has been expressed concern by some current and former board members, and I would say also the public, that the board leaves too much responsibility in the hands of the administration. But then it goes on to say, well, but our policies are our policies, and I guess it seems to be saying, well, our policies allow too much discretion to the administrations, therefore we're okay because the policies were complied with. When, if you really want to change, you're going to need to change something about your policies. And I don't see any evidence. I mean, the district was in trouble, folks. You have a lack of trust, you have lack of confidence. If this becomes permanent, this district will be in real trouble in terms of being able to provide education to its students. And
I'm gonna ask you to finish up because we have another person waiting and the time's up.
well, okay, then you can shut me off, Don. See you later.
Everybody gets 2 minutes, Herb. Brenda, you had your hand up?
Yes, I have just two rather brief comments. I was quoted under public comment on the minutes of December 20th, and there are two small things I would like to request that be changed. One is the spelling of my last name, which is on my Zoom picture here. And also, it said, I was quoted as saying they found a way to include administrators and students. I would request that teachers be added to that list as well. The second thing I have, however, is about the bond issue. There's been several things already in Front Porch Forum about do not vote for this bond. And I think part of it is, it's not just a bond, it just seems to, I think it seems to have listening to your discussion, it seems to have started off with a good way to pay for replacing the roof. But as time went on, things got added. So now it's not just the roofing, which is about 1.4 million, but there's a whole bunch of other stuff, 7 other things which just seem to have been thrown into the basket at random. And I think that's how it appears here. It appears like one of the congressional omnibus bills. There were, you know, anything that you want is put in there. And my guess is, unless the bond is well explained and not quite so inclusive, it will not pass again. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see any other hands up, so we'll move now to the consent agenda.
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
All right.
With the changes.
Do we need to pull the minutes first?
With the
Yeah,
request.
I pulled them up while Brenda was speaking, and I'm so sorry about that, Brenda. And I have added teachers and corrected the spelling of your name. Thank you so much for noticing that.
Okay, thank you.
Is your motion as corrected?
As corrected, yes.
All right. So Steve made a motion to approve the consent agenda as corrected.
A second.
Chris. All right. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Okay, we're gonna need an executive session under Title I VSA 5313A1D grievance. We don't need premature knowledge on that motion, but we will be inviting the MAEA leadership representatives in. Patrick will join us, and Beth McGeorge. And Katrina. And Annie Rutsky.
So for people who don't know, Annie Rutsky is a federal mediator who's worked with us on negotiations and helped us to work through a process for negotiations that has been really helpful to us. So we asked her to sit in on this meeting to help ensure we have a productive conversation.
So is there a motion to go in at 6:10?
So moved.
Chris? All right. Is there a second?
Sure.
All right. All those in favor of going into executive session under Title I VSA 5313A1D grievance, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right.
And our goal is to adjourn at 7:30.
and come back to
And come
public
back.
here.
Yes.
Right. So we're gonna meet in the campfire room.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I think everyone in this room except
Yeah, is it
Floyd
easier if I
is
just
invited
leave?
into executive session. I'm wondering if we
Oh,
turn the camera off.
That would be kind of nice because it's warm in here. Last time the campfire room was not campfirey at all.
back to our regularly scheduled meeting. Just gonna take a brief, we have newly elected student reps. And we have one joining us tonight, so I'll just let everybody go around and introduce. There'll be a test at the end of the meeting, so you can remember the names. So we'll start with Erin.
Aaron, Bristol rep.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Isabella Shea. I am one of the student representatives for Money.
What grade are you?
I am a sophomore.
And what town are you from?
I am from Bristol and New Haven.
Patrick Green, superintendent.
Don Gris.
Oh, sorry. I'm Katrina, Snap, assistant superintendent.
Don Griswold from Moncton.
And Don's our board chair, and I'm Krista. Sweeney from Bristol.
And Krista's the vice chair. I'm Steve Lorraine from Starkborough.
I'm Bailey Lane Gordon from Moncton.
Sarah LaPearl from Haven.
Kevin Hansen from Diston.
Chris Pearsall from Bristol. Kristen Toy from Starksboro.
And coming in hot is, Floyd, can you just introduce yourself to Isabella? She's our new student.
Hi,
board
Isabella, I'm Floyd. I'm the business manager here. I'm not a.
So that folks know, I connected with Isabel a little bit about this role, but she and I are going to try to meet some other time to talk a little bit more about how to make it possible for her and for us. We meet a lot and we meet for a long time, so we don't want to do that to her, but we're really glad to have students here. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you.
So now.
And do you have a copy of our agenda?
I got an email about it. I don't
Okay.
have a-
Oh,
Sometimes, yeah. It's there. All right, so our next item is under board management and governance, to accept the monitoring report for 3.2 accountability of the superintendent.
I'll make the motion.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Sarah? All right, any discussion? Krista?
I just, thank you, Sarah, for doing it. And I just wanted to kind of reflect on what Mr. Olson had said that I think relates to our thinking about a policy and governance committee and about how we look at our policies overall. And I'm hopeful that as we get better adept at reviewing and revising policies that I'm looking forward to the opportunity for us to do that.
Anyone else? All right. Okay, based on the information provided, does the board find that the interpretation is reasonable? This is just thumbs up or down. Just need to know. All right. Does the data demonstrate the accomplishment of this interpretation? All right. All those in favor of accepting the monitoring report for 3.2 accountability of the superintendent, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Okay, the next is to accept the monitoring report for 4.3 agenda planning.
So moved.
Steve,
I'll second.
Chris, any question or discussion? Krista.
Yeah, so thanks, Kevin, for doing the report and for the suggestions you made. I think that they're good to note that we, again, hoping for that policy and governance deeper dive, maybe in the form of a committee, but that we really haven't yet fully done the work of actively investigating and examining the ends policy. I did want to note that the quarterly strategic plan reports, I think, were an effort to get a closer look at progress toward the end. I don't know if that suffices. I think we need to have a conversation about it.
Anyone else? Okay, based on the information provided, does the board find that the interpretation is reasonable? All right. Does the data demonstrate the accomplishment of this interpretation?
Can I ask a question about that? I feel like it's still not clear. If we're saying we're partially incompliant, does that mean the data is not demonstrating the accomplishment?
Well, if it didn't, then there was a plan and you referenced the plan to improve, so.
It's a weird
I
question.
think it basically agreeing with the conclusions of the report.
Okay,
Saying that the
I
data,
think maybe
the
that,
data supports the conclusion that was come
Yeah.
to.
I wonder if we should change that language,
I agree,
because
because it's always.
we're not really
confusing.
saying that it's been
Right.
accomplished. That
Right.
assumes
Saying-
like, no, but yes.
The data does support, the evidence does support the conclusion that was arrived at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
About the interpretation.
And in that case, that would be.
I think we could throw that in a, how to improve the meetings.
Well, that would go on
Duly
this,
noted.
that you would look at when you're,
I think it's also policy and governance committee. item.
You guys, no, you, whomever might join that group. List of tasks.
all right. All right, so all those in favor of accepting the monitoring report for 4.3 agenda planning, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. The next item is an action item to direct the superintendent to draft language for the withdrawal of capital funds.
I can speak to that a little bit. So,
Do you need them?
Yeah, we need.
I'm sorry.
Someone.
Second,
Wait, who moved it?
Chris.
I did.
All right,
So this would basically give me sort of the authority to work with Dina to draft the language that would be an article that would go to a vote of the electorate, which is the way that these funds need to be accessed. Presumably by Australian ballot, which ideally would happen on town meeting day, because if we're doing a special election for this and it's Australian ballot in the 4 towns, I think town clerks won't be very happy about that because it's a huge piece of work to put together one of these elections. And there's a financial implication. It's probably give or take $1,000 a town to kind of make an election like that happen. So this sort of gives me the authority to do that and start working with Dina to bring that to you in later this month for action to accept the warning, just like you do with the budget and other actions.
So I'm curious in terms of your asking Dina about that process. If she could also weigh in on whether we're stepping on any rules regarding asking for money from the public after it's already been incurred as a liability. I'm wondering if we've already sort of stepped over a line that we don't want to then, dive further into the fire.
Sure.
To me, it's a little bit like going to a town meeting and there's a brand new fire truck outside. And you're looking at it and walk in and the fire chief says, hey, hope you're voting for my new fire truck out of the fire reserve that I already bought. It's a little bit like that, not quite the same circumstances. I mean, obviously you had a budget on something that then grew kind of unexpectedly. But I'm wondering if this is the vehicle for funding that, or do we have to essentially put it in a budget and make people aware of the fact that it's an overrun and we need a deficit spend in order to incorporate it into next year's budget. Really just as a way of acknowledging what's happened to it as it's gotten to this point. You know, without using a vehicle where we're theoretically supposed to get prior approval before we spend it. That's what spins around in my head when I see it.
I can definitely talk that through with Dina.
Is there a way to look at it and to use, redistribute, like where, so if we have that $1 million that's in the budget, could we use that? And then maybe go ask for a capital improvement or something different? Like, is it hot that we haven't done yet? Like, can we, like the locker rooms took a couple of $1 million years, right? To kind of deal with. Could we kind of look at it that way? Would that be more comfortable for everybody?
That's kind of, I think, what I'm suggesting in the deficit spend, because as it stands right now, we've encumbered the budget. You know, by approving the change order, we've already spent the money. So the trick is, how do we accommodate that cost without using a vehicle that we've told voters we're not going to use unless we have prior approval. And so now, in essence, the voters have got to vote for it anyway. Either way, they have to vote for it, because if we're going to say, look, we're going to increase the construction budget next year from 1 million to whatever it takes to pay this expense, they're going to have to approve that budget. So, but we're not asking them to do it through a vehicle where we told them we would get prior approval. It's a little bit maybe like splitting hairs, but it just, I think the second path maybe is more of an acknowledgement that, you know, we had an unforeseen expense and we have to pay for it, but we're not going to use a vehicle that we told people we would use only if they gave us prior approval. Maybe it smells the same to the public either way, I don't know. But that's kind of why I wanted to understand Dina's viewpoint, because there may be a legal way that you need to deal with this versus, you know, what might make us feel better.
Well, it'd also be an accounting process too, I think, and then what comes to mind is when we did the locker room, we somehow slid money across years. I mean,
Well, we did allow, you asked for sort of a waiver of the incurred costs in 1 year, pay for them in 1 year.
Policy language,
which policy language, so we allowed contracts to span over multiple seasons because we knew it was difficult to pinhole construction into our budget cycle. So that doesn't concern me as much as, and frankly, that's kind of what I thought we were doing with this 1.8 deficit number that we kept seeing in the budget financials each month. I thought we were splitting the years. I thought we were splitting the years, but in essence, we're really just seeing this lump hitting us in one shot. So.
Liz,
Maybe I'm a little, so my understanding of the purpose is that we have a budget that we're planning to spend on staff essentially, right? And we use the capital reserve fund to offset unexpected expenses to have less of an impact on our annual budget, right? Or wouldn't that, to me, that was my understanding of the purpose of using the capital reserve fund, is to keep some stability, as much stability as possible in the rest of the budget.
I think you have that mixed up with the Ed reserve, Liz.
Well, no, but if we're taking the money out of our budget to spend on capital costs, it's coming out of a budget that is essentially used for staffing, right? That's the majority of the budget is spent on that. So if we're using the money that we've set aside for that and instead spend it on filling the gap that we have here from this project, it won't be there for staff, right?
Right, so that's a good point. It could be that we want to do a double dip here and say we're going to increase the construction budget next year to cover the deficit spend, but make up for any difference that we asked to increase that construction budget by dipping into the Ed reserve. I mean, that's an option. It's not necessarily, there's some pros and cons to that, I'm sure.
We wouldn't know yet how much to increase the construction line by, because really what you're talking about with deficit spending is overspending the budgeted amount of the whole budget. So presumably we'll have a fund balance at the end of this year, which offsets some of the money we're talking about possibly taking out of the capital reserve fund. So the deficit spending doesn't equal the amount we would otherwise have taken out of the capital reserve. And we don't know yet what we'd be overspent by.
Do you think it would be an overspend or underspend over budget?
I think we would be overspending the budget. Because I think we were talking about 1.7 or 1.8 million. We're not gonna have, yeah, we're not gonna have a fund balance that high at the end of this year. But it'll be a chunk of that. Like our fund balance, we were just like 400,000 or 500,000, probably pretty conservatively at this point.
And you were asking to put that all into the capital reserve.
Not this year's, typically we do, but we aren't talking about taking action on this current fiscal year's fund balance because we don't know that, it hasn't been audited, so it skips a year. So
I
we're
guess
talking,
I'm thinking about what you just proposed.
right, so that's fund balance from last year that we're proposing to put toward next year.
Right, but we could, instead of putting that in the capital reserve, we could put that into the construction budget.
Not exactly. We can increase the construction budget and apply that fund balance from last year to offset taxes, which has the net effect of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But it's not quite as clean as
Right,
dumping it in from one into the other.
right.
Is that just like,
So-
oh, sorry.
So I just was thinking more broadly that, you know, this is a new vehicle, this fund for, or at least for me, I think for a lot of us here, I think it's a new vehicle for you to use. And it seems like we need to be more crisp about how we use it and communicate about it so that you know, it makes good sense to have it. But I think we need to make sure we're using it the right way. And we communicate that to folks about how we're using it. And so I don't, you know, for me, like, I don't doubt the soundness of applying this money. It's how we kind of are making the decision after the fact and not communicating that. So, again, it's a new tool for us, but it's something I think we need to be aware of, be more mindful of.
I agree, and I think in retrospect, the challenge has been we haven't really known how much money we need to ask for. But in retrospect, and I think Steve might have mentioned this at a prior meeting, even without the details known to say, hey, we're going to need to spend money out of this if we want to do this hobby project as proposed, or whatever the project might be. It'll be in the ballpark of X number of dollars. We won't know until we get closer to the completion of the project to know exactly how much we'll be looking for. That is a way we could have done this differently that I think would have everybody, including myself, feeling better about where we find ourselves right now.
Yeah, I think that point could have been even when that only bid came in. Because
Right.
It was significantly over.
Yep.
And at that point, it was. It was a pretty clear indication, I would think. That, we were going to bump up against this issue. So. I just want to deal with this issue in a way that doesn't make us look like we're ignoring what we've told people we would do with this fund.
Or end up not getting approval to use the funds.
So that's the end. I mean. So if there is a way to make use of what we have for surplus this year to help with that somehow. And to acknowledge that we deficit spent, but we're budgeting for that next year rather than withdrawing from a fund that requires prior public approval. In essence, you're doing the same thing either way, and I understand that. I don't know if the board has much wiggle room that at this point. We have to do one thing or the other. I think the first way just seems to be more of an acknowledgement, how we got here. And the capital reserve fund seems to be, I don't know, I feel like we're sort of disrespecting the way we built it. The language under which we built it anyway.
I wonder if in the interest of time, we should just ask, because we still have till the end of this month to warn. Is that right?
Yes, and technically we
If
could
we were
probably
gonna
go
do it.
early into February.
So
given
maybe
the
we
late
just
town
ask
meeting day.
Patrick and Dina and Floyd to kind of come back with a way to best, in your opinion, best.
Yeah, or at least some viable options that
Yeah.
have been vetted. Yep.
So as an action item,
Vote it down.
do we want to do any kind of a litmus test about the general direction of the solution?
I mean, that gets into like trying to solve it.
I mean, without taking an action, I'm sort of just wondering if the board had an initial preference without more detail, or maybe you could say, no, we need more detail first before we give any kind of a fund.
Well, I agree with Steve that that's where you're going with that.
What Steve proposed, you mean?
So the two options that I see right now are handling it through the capital reserve as the action proposes, or another accounting method, which,
Yeah,
without being maybe accurate about it, it would be, allocating money in next year's budget to handle the deficit spend.
okay. And that was what your conversation was focused on, and I agree with that. I think it's high risk to go and ask voters at this point in time to approve money after the fact. And if there's any way that we can, and the capital reserve fund is nothing more than converted operating budget dollars.
Yeah, so
Really?
it's
But-
previous years.
But
fund
so it's not like it's a bond, but nonetheless, if we can keep it within the 2 budget years, I think it would be much more palatable.
I would agree.
So we saying direct superintendent come up with a way to not have to.
Well, explore options.
Yeah, I was explore options. but
Yeah,
not have
okay, or not have.
Yeah.
To handle the essentially it's the lobby project. Cost overrun. Outside of the capital, outside of using the capital reserve fund. Explore options, I think that's the term. Now that's. We've already had an action, because was this action already moved and
Seconded to direct the superintendent to draft language for the withdrawal of capital fund.
Okay,
We need to
so,
vote that down.
do we need to vote that? We need
Yeah,
to
yeah.
vote it down in order to run
To
the.
amend it.
Right, yeah.
I'll just vote it down.
All right, do you want to vote now?
Yeah,
All right, all those in favor of directing the superintendent to draft language for the withdrawal of capital reserve funds, please say aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Yeah.
Abstentions? All right, try again.
So I move to direct the superintendent to explore options for budgeting for the lobby project cost overruns in next year's budget.
Run that by me one more time.
As opposed,
I'm trying to type that you're
Direct the
saying.
superintendent to explore options, budgeting to
budget.
handle the lobby project overruns in next year's budget. That's what I have so far. Is that
Handle
clear?
Lobby.
overruns
Sorry, I've
in
been up
next year's
since three.
budget as opposed to using the capital reserve.
Do we want to specifically reference capital reserve? Because that very well may be an option. I think we just said we want options.
Well, we could certainly go back and improve this even after that happens. I mean, we're just looking at the option of what we're looking at. So once the option is provided, we might look at that and say,
I kind of agree with leaving it at options, though. You don't want
no, that's what the motion is going to be.
Okay. so no capital reserve.
Because I don't think anybody here really understands exactly how we.
So we're taking out as opposed to,
Right.
Yeah.
that's what these, that's what.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Yeah.
all right, so we'll just leave it at that. We don't need to-
Just options.
Sure,
Okay,
I understand.
Steve made that motion.
Second,
Krista? Any discussion?
I mean, I think I think it's a decision based on like, where do we want to deal with it before or after? Because I think regardless, we're gonna, if we go one route, the second route is gonna be, people would look back and go, why didn't we just put it from here to here then? And so I think it's gonna be one of those, no matter which way, it depends on which way you're facing.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
I mean,
because it's-
sorry, my 2 cents, so. The voucher goes to make the options.
Right. All right, all those in favor of directing the superintendent to explore options for budgeting to handle the lobby project overruns in next year's budget, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. All right. Next is a discussion around 2.6 asset protection policy review.
yeah, so I was asked to see if I could suggest some specific language that would incorporate accessibility somewhere into this policy. And I did some research to see what I could find, and it was really difficult to find something that seemed like it would fit, which made me wonder if this is the right policy, which made me think about policies in general. And yeah, the rabbit hole. But what I did find that I then shared with Steve and the other folks that were looking at 4.1 was something that I think we could maybe apply to all of our policies. And it was an example of an equity lens. And I'm sending the link to Chris so that it gets into our minutes. So you can't see it right now, but there's lots of different versions of this, and we could choose from different options. But the idea is to have a lens that could be applied to all policy development and review. And so instead of trying to find a sample language that gets at one piece of our efforts toward inclusion, we would be looking at all of our policies to ensure they're considering this. Some of the questions in the example that I found, questions that we would ask ourselves about our policies are things like, who is impacted by the content of this policy, practice, or decision? In what ways does this policy, practice, or decision increase or decrease access, equity, and inclusion? Are the people impacted by the policy, practice, or decision included in the development or review discussion? So that really hits a lot of my sweet spots of things that I hope we could move toward as a district in terms of district-wide equity and inclusion. So I guess I'm sort of punting it for now to this, again, very hopeful formation of a group to look more at these things.
Any questions?
Well, just in a quick scan here. Of course, I do think the place where this would fit, if we were trying to put it in this policy, would be under item number 4, unnecessarily expose the organization, its board, or its staff to claims of liability, because that's the primary enforcement mechanism for accessibility issues. And that doesn't necessarily throw a broad equity lens on the whole policy. I'm just, if you were looking for a place to set this, essentially in the ADAG, which is the rules around the ADA. Accessibility is actually item number 1 in any construction project. It's at the front of your scope. And you're not really allowed to ignore accessibility issues until those issues comprise more than 20% of your budget costs. That's the yardstick for feasibility to handle an accessibility issue. So if you got a town hall, for instance, doesn't have an ADA restroom, you can't really go preparing a whole bunch of other things and putting additions on the building until you ticked off the accessibility checklist to the point where it comprises at least 20 or more percent of or less of that proposed budget. So
Yeah, I think that may be an interesting place to start. My only concern is with the liability framework, and I think that what might constitute access or inclusion has a low legal bar, but from the end user may still be fairly inaccessible. So I appreciate where you're saying that there is a place where we could put something. I guess I'd like to talk more about what the language should read.
yeah, no, I agree. That's a very narrow focus on
Exactly.
the topic.
Right, anyone else? Okay. Discussion, voting by Australian ballot. In the past, we have had concessions about the way we could vote or not vote because of the COVID rules. And so like last year, everything had to be by ballot. We didn't vote. We voted everything by the ballot. So those are being lifted or in the process of being lifted or done or.
So the regulations were relaxed around voting during COVID because folks weren't having in-person meetings. So voting from the floor became complicated. So they allowed you to sort of just change without going through a process to vote everything by Australian ballot, which is what we've done the last 2 years. Prior to the last 2 years, we voted from the floor at our annual meeting for things such as who's going to be the moderator, the salary for the moderator, salary for board members, etc. And of course, other topics get voted by Australian ballot, like the budget, putting money in capital reserve, things of that nature. So we've now in recent years voted a couple of different ways. The default goes back to the way we did this before COVID. So those regulations that were relaxed during COVID are no longer relaxed. So you have to go back to the way things were voted on pre-COVID for this coming annual meeting. If for future annual meetings, the preference is to vote everything by Australian ballot, like we've done the last 2 years, the action would need to be to warn that vote and have the public vote in the affirmative to say, this is the way we're going to vote moving forward.
Yeah.
So we're in the window of time now when we have to be thinking about what are we warning for a vote on town meeting day. So it was important to talk now about what's the board's preference going forward. And if defaulting back to the way we always did it is acceptable, there's no action needed. But if you want to continue to vote by Australian ballot for everything, then we do need to take this action.
So what would be the advantages to continue with Australian ballot? I'm leading the question, but in my opinion, it was terribly awkward.
Voted by Australian ballot.
Yeah,
There's so many parts.
yeah. So why, is there any advantage I'm not seeing?
I think the potential advantage is you might avoid talking for an hour and a half about should we pay the moderator $50 or $60
Fine.
at an annual meeting.
I mean, remind me, we still have to vote for the budget and for the expending capital reserve.
And depositing money into the capital reserve, right, reserve.
By Australian ballot. We're not going to do that in the floor vote.
Right.
Like in the old days.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, when I talk about the old days now, it only goes back to when Amy was doing sport, only 2018,
Medium days.
right?
You remember voting on the school budget at the town meeting?
That's Starksboro. That
No.
wasn't. any of
And
the
Lincoln,
other
starts with
towns.
Lincoln, yeah.
I also think that, yes, it might save us time at the meeting, but if you're one of those people counting the votes after by Australian ballot and you have the millions of piles and stuff well into the evening, I'm okay with spending a little time chatting at a town meeting with people who actually show up. I'd be perfectly fine with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I echo that. And I think, especially now, we want to keep all channels to discourse open.
And I think last year when where all that was voted by that on the ballot, that there were complaints from the people sitting there saying, why am I here? Because it doesn't matter. We're just talking about it. So it's sort of an in between. The important stuff's on the ballot and we'll get through all that other little housekeeping stuff.
Is there complications to voting, like voice voting during a meeting with online options? I'm assuming we would still continue like a hybrid type situation for our annual meeting. or
I have to
can we
double
not
check.
do
I think you can only vote if you're physically present.
that? Okay, so that would be really important to get out.
Yeah, I think people are so used to having a Zoom option these days that
Yeah.
it would have to be clear that the town meeting is going to be, I mean, the school district meeting is going to be in person.
Because you have to have a way that you need to capture what town they're in, they sort of sign in. Maybe there are ways to do that digitally, but I'm not sure it's even allowed, but that would be another, maybe Dina question.
So it sounds like as a group, we're okay with going through that list of things and reading the warning at the in-person and then the big stuff.
We have to do it this year anyway.
Yeah,
Okay.
We'll evaluate then.
right. See how crazy that
You might
gets.
get it on the ballot sooner.
All right, update, the ownership linkage plan.
No update to share. Erin, you
Yes.
drafted that. Would you like to add any of your thoughts? And I'm putting you on the spot, so if not.
No, I don't have any updates either, but I do think it's important and perhaps the community engagement discussion would help us facilitate why. But no, as of right now, no change, unfortunately.
So,
On to
I'll just
community
roll right into
engagement.
that.
Yeah.
So folks saw the report and the hope was to specifically focus our linkage plan around the question of equity. But I think it was clear that that's a question here, and there's also the overall way we communicate and connect with our community that's here, and the two are sort of, it's hard to move the equity question forward without also really thinking about this way that we're, the ongoing way we're building trust and communication. And I think we've had some good processes in place, and I think they are, some of them have, for different reasons, fallen off the wayside. And there's more work to really do there. we don't, we have the communication process that we developed a couple of years ago, but it's this thing that's out here that we don't always follow. And I don't say that with any judgment. It's just, we just don't. Maybe it's not a great process. And so I think we're lacking a bigger structure, which is what the ownership linkage plan should do. There were folks that they attended the meeting that are interested in having the equity conversation. It's important for us to figure out how to invite people to be engaged in what they're interested in, but also understand what the board focus is. So that's going to need to be ongoing work. But again, it's overlaid by this feeling of not knowing what's going on and therefore misplacing or having mistrust. I don't know. Do you want to add anything to that, Erin or Liz, as you guys were at the meeting as well?
Liz, do you want to go first? Or have anything?
I would just say that they're more, they're like almost, yeah, we're like, I think what I've admired is that Krista's trying to give a really open-ended concept there, like really open it up, community engagement. What are we doing? And then also trying to kind of give it some guardrails, right? So that it's related to, like, it can support board work. And I think it's been a really tricky thing to do at the moment. So that's my main observation.
Yeah, we got some interesting feedback during that meeting about sort of this challenge between activism and procedure and process and policy, and how there's sort of a disconnect between what the group is, which is looking at policy and procedure, versus the activism part. And it made the conversation take a little bit of a turn to this place where they were really describing how procedure can't work and also exist with open communication, which, kind of halted the equity conversation. So what I left with was the message of, we need to work on building a way to come together, which really is the ownership linkage plan, but have it be really open-ended. And in my research for finding an example of an ownership linkage plan, there really isn't. There aren't. They don't exist in the form that I'm looking for. So it's a little bit like building our own. That is building our own. And it sounded like there were people part of the community engagement committee who were interested in doing that kind of work and figuring that out. And then also people who are really interested in the activism piece. So I think there's that push-pull is tricky to figure out, which is why there hasn't been really any progress in the ownership linkage plan, because I think it's a bigger conversation that we had, that we need to figure out how to have.
I'm confused. I guess I don't understand the activism statement, so if you could clarify that.
So there's a push to have the equity not just as a conversation, but as something we go do tomorrow. Have an action on how to make kids feel safe, or how to make marginalized students feel included, or all those together. So there's a push to have a plan for how to go act almost immediately on how to make those things occur. That would be the activism piece, which some members thought perhaps that was what the community engagement committee was for, was to do that work, to go in and do whatever's proposed for those things.
And Liz actually brought up the example of the HVAC group, and I thought that was a really great example, because I think there is a way to embrace community interest and experience, but it can be tricky, and so yeah, it's an ongoing discussion and challenge. But I think that that there may be a way to have this group break up into two groups, one that focuses on ownership linkage and one that focuses on the equity conversation based on people's interest. We'll see. I do think that as a board, it's really important for us, and recognizing capacity and all of that, to not lose sight of the ongoing communication. And there's things happening and folks making some good suggestions. But it's kind of like we as a board have responsibility for communication, and then our superintendent communicates about things, and then our superintendent communicates to us about things. And so there's like a couple different ways that communication needs to happen, and some of it's going pretty well, and some of it I think is, we need to talk more about. Steve, for example, made a suggestion, I think, to the whole group about the Hannaford superintendent's communication to the whole board. So it's complicated when you talk about communication. It's been entangled in a lot of different things. So
Is that a confidential? I was gonna ask. Steve.
No, it's in the board, it's in the minutes of the board.
So it's actually communication to everyone.
Yeah, it's communication to the public, and it's a public meeting.
Just checking.
So there is that. I'm wondering if it makes some sense to work the problem backwards. In other words, we keep trying to think, how can we communicate better with our public? What about asking the public how they would prefer we communicate with them?
And we did open that conversation during that meeting. I mean,
Maybe there's a thought exchange about that, like how would you like to interact with the board?
the response we got to that preliminary question was that the data already exists.
That was the answer.
That was the
well, it was
preliminary
around like
answer.
engaging with the community around the conversation about it.
Oh,
So, but even out, that was sort of the context of everything was that. So I had brought up, well, actually I didn't bring up, but a member had brought up that within my monitoring report, there was a section about how do we gather data and then disperse that and prove that we use the data in the way we said we were going to. So the fidelity of it. And that sparked a bigger conversation about what the data already exists. Why do you need to create a way to collect data? And so the answer sort of was that the data exists in many forms: front porch forum, community engagement, people who come here, so that we have what we need in order to get communication. But I would agree with you that it feels like people are always asking for more. But when we ask what, they ask things that perhaps we either can't answer or don't have, or whatever it is. So I would agree, and I think that's part of the ownership linkage work, is to work that backwards and figure out what they want, which is, I like your suggestion, Krista, about perhaps splitting that meeting time up into those who want to work on that and the other part.
And I think, the community engagement committee has sometimes really just been about communication, and sometimes it's really just been about engagement, but it's too much to do both.
In one meeting.
And it's also, communication in general is very time consuming, and it's hard to get it perfectly right. We lack a communications professional in the district, which makes it also hard for Patrick and his team to get communication out all the time. So it's, it's a moment right now where I think folks are feeling especially frustrated, and we've also maybe been less, or I say we as in the board has been maybe less communicative recently, and it's that was evident at the meeting.
And this data that you're talking about, I mean, essentially it's public, either public comment about something that they'd like to see changed, or they have a question about it. So
So really, it should just relate to the ends, though.
But that data is, let's just say, for instance, we had a quarterly public forum where you just invited everybody to come and it wasn't held like this.
Right.
You had a public comment, we could Q&A in the middle of it, much more free flowing sort of thing. But in essence, you're going to gather a lot of questions. You may not be able to answer them right there in the spur of the moment. And we get questions and emails, we get questions sometimes in public comment that we can't respond to in a meeting. And we don't necessarily have a vehicle for following up with each of these folks in a reasonable way that you might expect if you had made a information request.
Right.
Formal information request.
And I think in an ideal world, so I remember working with Sue McCormick, and she would talk about like, you should have this sort of regular ongoing, Foursquare meal kind of approach to engagement where it's like the quarterly chats. And honestly, I remember when Katrina, you were the principal at BES and you had coffee and, sometimes probably nobody came. Maybe a good more portion of the time nobody came, but you have it, right? You still do it because it's a space to hold for people. And then you have like special communication efforts or engagement efforts around a big effort. I think we've done a lot of the communication around big effort. And it takes up a lot and doesn't always leave as much time for the weedies,
And the reason to propose or look at what Hannaford was doing in terms of superintendent communication is just that it is a public forum. It's a method for the administration to, you can see what kind of questions are floating around all month. What are the big topics? In the quarterly report, you can report progress on those things. You can say, hey, we were doing this, and this, and all, and hey, same time, look what the girls basketball team did. Look what, blah, blah, blah. So it's a little bit of newsletter. It's a little bit of addressing a chance to address some of the issues that are floating around that, you made an attempt to talk a little bit about that in this, where we headed after the merger discussion, but that would be something you could talk about more regularly, I'll have to say the interim superintendent we have there now does this weekly. And he was mentioning that was his strength when he was at his previous job, which by the way was in a district that was rated one of the top academically performing districts in the whole country. I mean, this guy is very good. And he said his main focus was communication, just getting what's going on out there to everybody, so there's very little question about what we're doing, where we're going, how we're doing it. And sometimes I think there's not enough of that. And it's very much coming from the public at us. What are we doing? What are we doing? There's very little bit of it going back in the other direction. It comes out in little pieces and parts. That was my reason for sort of suggesting that.
Sarah? I am in a different school district and I don't know if it goes to the public, but it might. I think we get one, it's more of a s'more kind of account thing every month. And our principal does one every Friday. So that goes out and it's called celebrations. So I don't know if that happens in all of the schools, but I do know that the superintendent's like once a month and the principals.
And you've probably seen the s'more version that I sent out from the Career Center, the assistant superintendent with that one. That's the kind of more of a general newsletter. This gets right down into the weeds about, if somebody wants to know what our declining enrollment is, here's the latest NESDEC figures can be part of one of the weekly reports. You just got this in. And you send that out to the board, but it doesn't necessarily go out to the general public.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that would be really helpful. And I think it would kind of, I don't want to say have the appearance because that's not really what I mean, but I think it would definitely give the community the perspective that we're doing something proactively. And I think, not to put you on the spot, but I think this would be a really cool opportunity for Isabella too. Like if there's highlights where, you've got enough to report out on, coming from the student board, here's, 5 things that, because I think that shows that we as a board feel it's important to have a student voice and because it's been stated that, we want to hear more from the school. So I think that would be a really cool opportunity for us, student voices to be heard as well.
Yeah, you could also maybe rotate between the principals and have them
Yeah.
do a part of your report. Each one could be principal perspective from the municipal.
In the old country, it got rolled up from frontline supervision to middle management to general management and then out of the plant every week. So I mean, it's not like you got to do it all yourself. You
Yeah.
just got to have somebody put it all together for you.
I think the word transparency gets thrown around a lot, and I think that just sort of, not that this is necessarily gonna make things
It helps.
completely
It helps.
transparent, but it
Mm.
it works against the argument that we're trying to find something,
Agreed.
bury something or whatever.
And any opportunity we have to communicate just really strengthens that,
Mhm.
right? Like any missed opportunity for communication just works against us, so.
Agreed.
People fill in the blanks.
People
Yes.
fill in the blanks.
And then when you have an opportunity, not just for sharing info, but like, oh, and we could use your input. That adds, that's the engagement part.
Right.
Puts the onus out there.
Yeah.
And having a mechanism, some kind of structured mechanism to handle community questions and responses.
I think that's probably part of the linkage plan that I'm most interested in is having some sort of vehicle for that.
Right.
The board, I forget what the board was called that you used, the discussion board thingy.
So the
Thought
little
exchange?
sticky notes.
Yeah, thought exchange, maybe that could be one.
What was the sticky
Go
note?
with the Post-it.
Jamboard.
Yeah,
Jamboard, yeah, that could be one way. It's
Moment with
pretty,
Jamboard.
yeah, but it's chaotic too.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, it's a little bit chaotic, but you can get good data out of that. But just thinking about that, but again, you want it to get to a lot of different types of people. So having just one way to do it isn't gonna be appropriate, but. More to come. Ongoing work. All right, Steve, an update on the monitoring report for policy 4.1 governance style
Okay, so you linked,
in 8 minutes or less.
okay, so you linked. All I'll say is, this,
Go team.
we worked this out sort of too late to put it in here formally for action. It's pretty much ready if you want to read it, if that's the way it will come out next month, or next meeting. I'm not sure how that works in the agenda. The other thing that you'll see if you go to the link that's in here is that in this version, I took a stab at trying to improve the English, because it was written in rather confusing English in a lot of ways. And I mean, I remember when these policies were coming out, they were coming out like in rapid fire because the Policy and Governance Committee was trying to get the new board up and running, and we were approving these things like at every meeting. So, I could see some of this needing a closer look at wordsmithing, but in order for us to adopt the actual policy language changes, as small, as just grammar related as they may be, and the corresponding changes to the interpretations, I think we would have to go through the formal policy modification process, which, by the way, is not written in policy. So one of the first things that I want to do if we were going to have a policy and governance committee is to adopt the policy revision policy. so that we all knew how. to revise the
so
policy.
Community engagement committee would love that. Conversation.
Yes, yeah, they would love.
We were really fast.
I'll tackle that one, Kristen.
And luckily, there's already one written by the VSBA. We'd simply have to clean it up a little bit and we'd have it. So that would take care of that small piece of housekeeping and but that would give us a regular process for,
So this isn't our draft then. or
this is our draft.
Oh,
If
this
you-
is,
If
okay.
you look at the actual evidence and conclusions sections of this, this is what the group came up with. But I did want to point out that there are suggested changes to the actual policy language and the interpretations, really just to clean up the English. And if we had a PGC committee, we might delve into a little bit more of whether this is got an equity lens applied to it. And whether or not some of these things make sense, like, I know there's one statement in here that I was scratching my head about. You know, why is it written like that? And we can talk about things like that. Without taking up the entire board and doing that. So the report, in essence, if you wanted to read it in, ahead of next month, you can do that. In terms of just addressing Herb's read on one thing that we did right in here was that you know, there has been some discussion over time between either a board member, a former board member, some of the public, that the board you know, through policy governance basically leaves too much to the superintendent and doesn't take enough responsibility for stuff. And my only point in this was to bring it up because it had been brought up in the past. And this is the policy where we actually said that we're going to govern by policy governance. So it simply was a placeholder or a discussion to say, is this a valid concern or not a valid concern? And in this monitoring review, our opinion is we're following the policy as it's laid out today. And if we want to change that policy, that's, you know, that's for the board to discuss in the future, either in this group or by a recommendation from the PDC committee. So I wasn't planning on reviewing this policy, you know, our adherence to this policy based on this comment. I just wanted to put this out there that it was work to be done potentially in the future.
I wonder if maybe we can look at our agenda planning to see if we want sometime relatively soon to put an action item for a PG&C committee. And so we could propose a structure and see if there are any volunteers, and because it feels like we have a lot of things that some of us would be interested in that committee working on, but it won't happen unless we have a committee. So maybe we should get it on the agenda to see if we agree to have it at least.
Isn't it? I think it's hanging out because
Is
there's
it?
a column over here to the right now.
But I think there was conversation about engaging with someone to talk about
Right.
committees
that's
within
right.
policy
You're
governance.
Right.
Okay,
So we're
Which
gonna
we've
meet
done.
so we're meeting in early
in
February,
February
right?
with someone to go.
So we'll put it on the agenda after
Yeah.
And
So
February
VSBA?
3rd. We're meeting with.
they connected.
It was
us.
through the VSBA.
VSBA.
Jeannie Collins is the person that they reached out to as someone experienced to help us talk that through.
And then the thinking was she would try to come maybe to our meeting.
A March meeting with the new board, so whatever turnover there's going to be to start that work with a new board rather than just do that work and then have whatever turnover we're going to have.
Mhm.
So there is a plan for that to come down.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, possibly me.
Mhm.
Unless I get I have not heard.
Oh, you haven't, well, I think, I mean, it's just a matter of what Bristol wants to do
I'll
for
check in
for
again.
your term. They may just say, run when you've got that remaining year left, but I
Are
just,
you-
They were very
Well,
confused.
no, Well, there was a mistake on the petition that it was listed as a 2-year term when it was actually a 3-year term. So according to the
Because
law.
it was an old 2-year term
Right.
that I was running for.
Well, now we're all threes.
Right.
And so so it really is a 3-year term. So in order to get that 3rd year, she's got to run for the remaining year of that term. And it's just when it's easiest for the Bristol town clerk to have it happen now. Or when it's at the end of that term, it's just in
I'm
question.
hoping she tells me soon because if I have to gather
Right,
signatures, I need
Yep.
some
By the end of the
time.
month. Right, all
But I'll call her again.
right, that was a little sidebar. All right, so we are in need of another executive session because we had so much fun the first time. And we do have a few things to do when we come out, so you can't just bolt when we leave, because we have a few things we have to do. We can, however, let you go. You don't have to hang around and wait for us, because we tend to talk a little longer than we plan.
And Isabel and I had talked about connecting, if we couldn't do it after this meeting at community council's next meeting, if anyone else is interested, it is middle of the day on Friday, but yeah, just to kind of talk a little bit what we do. And
As a newbie, maybe you can reach out separately and be like, hey, this is what we're talking about, and if that's something virtual that I could potentially join, but I'd like to know more about that.
Okay, is there a way to virtually join this?
We have not, I have not seen a virtual join to community council, but I'm sure we could do that if that is an option, if people are interested.
And it's at Wednesday, like 2.
It's like, yeah, it starts at 2:15. It's usually held in the campfire room.
And it's every Friday.
It's usually every Friday. If there's an assembly, it is moved to a Thursday.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Could you join?
Sure.
Okay. Could you join?
I'll make myself available.
So maybe we could find out if we could do.
Yeah, I'll talk to them.
Yeah, we've certainly increased our participation in these meetings quite a bit by having Zoom connections.
So,
Yeah, of course.
thanks for joining us.
Great to meet
Yeah.
you.
Oh, do you need to, do you
Well,
want to do that?
Yeah, we can vote to go into executive session and then wait for the room to clear so we don't have to move. So then you can get your function break then. So it's for this executive session, it's Title I, BSA 5313A1A contracts, specifically the Lincoln exit agreement, which we are currently unsettled. So we have to determine that speaking about this in public session would put the district at a disadvantage in a separate motion, and then, given that knowledge, a motion to go into executive session.
I believe that this would put us in a disadvantage.
Second.
Anyone have any questions about why it would put us at a disadvantage, or do we all remember in the past the reasons?
Several times.
Okay. So all those in agreement that speaking about this topic would put us at the district at a disadvantage, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so that one, given the knowledge that speaking about this in public session would put us at a disadvantage, is there a motion to go into executive session and invite our board counsel Dina Atwood and Patrick and Floyd to join us?
I'll make that motion.
All right.
Who seconded?
Yeah, I did.
All right. All those in favor of going into executive session with our invitees at 8:49, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right.